Hemp Foundation TALKS, where we listen to the heartbeats of the hemp industry and learn the celebrations, challenges, and discoveries from hemp leaders and advocates from around the world. Hi, I'm Rebecca, International Business Officer with the Hemp Foundation, and I will be your host. Today's guest is Drew Kitt. Since 2019, Drew Kitt has owned and operated a CBD retail dispensary, Moons CBD, located in Asheville, North Carolina. In 2019, Drew also began working with the International Hemp Exchange, HEMPx, providing hemp genetics for cannabinoids, grain, and fiber through his vast network and distribution channels. Drew began his career in the hemp industry in 1996. He has an MBA with a concentration in sustainability, is a certified Ganjier, a brand ambassador, and sits on the Global Hemp Association's research committee. Drew is focused on developing the industrial hemp supply chain, from manufacturer to processor to farmer to genetics. Welcome, Drew.
Why, thank you for having me. Nice to talk with you.
Yes. So please tell us, what motivated you to get started in the hemp industry?
Well, like many others that you either have spoken to or may speak to, I got involved back in the early mid 90s. I was going to Hofstra University on Long Island, which is actually located in Hempstead, ironically enough. And I ended up dropping out, and I traveled around the country with the Grateful Dead, like some others. And during my travels, I was turned on to hemp. You know, I'd been around the plant for a good part of my life, but I wasn't aware of all of the attributes of hemp. And in fact, I'll show you since I could see you, but my Emperor Wears No Clothes 1995 edition of Jack Herer and his book. And that was something that was, I was exposed to while traveling on the road and found it fascinating, all of the different benefits that this plant can provide beyond just, at the time was THC, but then there's so many other things with the cannabinoids and terpenes and fiber and grain, and just an amazing plant. And I was so motivated by it that when I ended up coming back east, I was living in Burlington, Vermont, and I ended up managing the Vermont Hemporium. So that was really how I got involved in the industry at a career level. We had 3 retail shops. It was different back then than it is now. I'm wearing one of the pieces of clothes that we used to sell, but it was hats and hacky sacks and different twine and all sorts of different, mostly from the fabric, that the hemp material that was all being imported because the plant was illegal. And it took 20 years before it became legal here in the US.
Yeah. So from there, and then you took a little bit of a break in between that time?
Yeah, well, I found this other book I'll show you called the Hemp Pages, and it's a source book, a directory. This was from 1999.
Wow.
And I was flipping through it the other day and found an ad that I had placed in it for the first company that I started called Hemp Provisions, kind of a play on words, but I was getting involved in distribution and importing it to provide some of the raw materials, some of the fabric to other manufacturers. But it was challenging, like I said, being that it was illegal and prohibition. And ultimately, I ended up relocating to where I live now in Asheville, North Carolina. And I'll skip over 20 years, but during that time, went back and finished my undergraduate degree. I ended up getting an MBA, as you mentioned, with a concentration in sustainability. I was working for a logistics firm doing import and export, and a friend had contacted me who was living in Colorado because he was transporting some biomass, or trying to, from Colorado to Oregon, and this was during the Farm Bill. So different states still were able to, under research pilot programs, were able to grow hemp, usually through universities, or you can get licenses to grow, and they had grown some biomass that they were trying to move for extraction for cannabinoids, because this is around when CBD was becoming a thing. Sanjay Gupta did his CNN special talking about Charlotte Figi and her use of cannabinoids as a beneficial therapeutic medicine, and it was becoming a thing, which I wasn't aware of until they contacted me and said, hey, we're trying to transport this biomass and we're having a hard time moving it. Can you help? And so we did. I got involved in it, and about a year and a half later, hemp became legal. So I opened up a shop, because for me, that was the quickest, easiest thing to do. I was familiar with retail, and I wanted to kind of put my stake in the ground and say, I'm back in the industry. So Moons CBD is a little shop that I opened here in Asheville, North Carolina.
That's amazing. That's so awesome to hear your journey. Is that your shop?
That's my own shop.
You got many. You have many hats, right? That's your shop
right.
hat.
I wear many different hats. So. But yeah, I mean, the shop is it's really, I consider myself more horizontally integrated within the industry. So a lot of people that get involved may be more vertically integrated, where they're either cultivating or processing into different products and branding it and then distributing it, or getting it to retail brands. I'm just more involved in providing different cannabinoid products that I've sourced from locally. So I have about a dozen local brands in my shop, because farmers who are growing it or processing it into different brands and products don't have a brick and mortar shop. And it's really hard. It's such a crowded space online. You know, I do have some products online, but most of what I have is in the shop, and it's a real focus for the local community. We're a pretty saturated market here in Asheville. It's like Beer City. We have a lot of breweries, but there's also a lot of hemp. But the thing that I like to do is really engage with the customer as they walk into the shop, and it's education. It's really understanding, why are they there? What have they heard? What's their interest? And then being able to explain cannabinoids and terpenes and different product types to identify whether it's which product may work best for them, dosage, because there's a lot of different variables within each of these products, frequency, how often they should take it to potentially help. The FDA, of course, regulates, well, doesn't regulate, they need to, but they don't allow any medical claims to be made. So you kind of have to refer to research that's been done and try to help explain what might be beneficial for them to try. And for the most part, if you know, if they try it and it works, they'll come back for more. And it's a real one-on-one experience that, you know, I provide. Being that I'm not a smoke shop or a vape shop or a gas station, there's a number of places to find CBD, but here it tends to really be a focus on what can be potentially most beneficial. It's amazing to really hear the stories.
So you're really on the front line of educating them, the consumer, not just like where they can just go into the gas station and they don't know, you know.
Well, they could have a bad experience, or they could try it, say they tried it, but without knowing, you know, what exactly they tried, if they haven't done the research to really understand the source, or looking at those certificates of analysis, the COA, and determine what's actually in the product. It's really difficult for consumers to know. I mean, I've seen some products that are advertising that they provide benefits, and there aren't even cannabinoids. It's hemp seed oil. It's not even the extract from the plant. So the industry should really be regulated. And certainly now there's also a lot of products that are being produced in labs that aren't even coming directly from the plant. And you know, it's somewhat of a concerning. So I kind of took it to the next level, and I found this program, which you had mentioned, called the Ganjier program. And so
tell us more about the significance of being a Ganjier. What does that mean?
It was an amazing program. It took about a year. It was both online and then in person. And basically their program is structured so that you learn the history, the science, botany, the genetics, cultivation, processing, sales, and the consumption of cannabis. So it's not a hemp specific, and really hemp is cannabis. So there's only one plant. The differentiation is the threshold of THC. So hemp in 2018 Farm Bill was defined as having less than 0.3% delta 9 THC by dry weight. And that definition is really where the industry is working to, you're either on one side of that line or on the other. But cannabinoids is just one part of what the plant has to offer, you know. So with the Ganjier, it's specifically focusing on what I had already mentioned, really engaging with the consumer, talking through them about all the different products and trying to match something to them that could be most beneficial.
So you're like trying to match people, but with the whole not being regulated and balancing what you can say, like how do you do that?
I have some charts. So there's a company that's, and I've seen them in a lot of other shops that I've been to, where it kind of gives a high level overview of terpenes. So terpenes, which is the aroma, essentially that you smell within cannabis, but it also provides some flavor, but there's effects. So different terpenes can have potentially different effects. And of course, cannabinoids, there's over 100 terpenes in the plant, over 100 cannabinoids. So really understanding the makeup of that plant or what is in that product, to when you hear like sativa, that's more of a plant type. It's a characteristic. It's a taller, more narrow leaf plant that's more equatorial, where it was originally came from, but the effects are more of an uplifting terpene like limonene or terpinolene, and also tends to have more THC than CBD. Whereas an indica plant might have more myrcene and caryophyllene, which are more sedatives, more relaxing, with a higher percentage of CBD, which CBD, again, based on research, can't make any claims, but it's been shown that it can help with sleep and relaxation, amongst several anti-inflammatory, anti-anxiety. So using these charts, it's a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Yes.
So kind of it helps to have a visual aid. And that's one of the things that I do. And again, it really takes time. You have to balance how much information you share with kind of where is the consumer, because you could easily glaze over after like 5 minutes of just divulging all this information. So it's a process, it's an art and a skill, I would say, to be able to explain the science of the plant. And then of course, budget, you want to be able to, it really boils down to trying to find something for them to try and experiment with over the course of, a couple of weeks or a month, different dosages, different frequencies, and see if it helps them. And if it does, they come back for more. Right.
And that's a very good approach, is for them to look at it from a long-term effect, right? Not just, oh, let me take this and see how I react to it in the short term. It's more about the long-term health benefits and then paying attention, observing how it's affecting you, and knowing and coming to you as a resource to know, what are the different types and how is it going to affect me personally, and when can I use it for what purpose.
In a lot of cases, you can have a bad experience, either in one respect where you try something, like I tried CBD and it didn't do anything for me. Well, maybe it was like 5%, or 5 milligrams per milliliter. Maybe it was just too low of a dose, and it wasn't sufficient for what your body needed. So you tried it, but you didn't really get what you could have had you been informed about the product. One of you had mentioned as far as being a brand ambassador. So after getting that certification, I was retained by a local distributor who sent me out on the road. And over the course of the last 6 months, I've traveled over 4,000 miles, been to over 400 shops in 4 different states here in the Southeast, kind of get me out of my shop, my little bubble. And I got to see a lot of what others are doing in the industry. And sadly, there are very few shops that are really focused on the consumer. They have a bunch of different products, and whether they know what's in it or not, or the people that are working at these shops don't know, and it's a little disconcerting, because I think, you see the bright flashing CBD in the window, but some of these products that people are taking, especially with edibles, once you take it, you took it, and you may end up having a bad experience because you weren't told what it is that you were taking. And some of these products are psychoactive, and that's a completely different experience. I mean, there's a time and a place, kind of understand the set and the setting for the person to potentially consume some of those products, and it does provide some value potentially, but you want to know beforehand what it is that you're getting yourself into.
So going along, with that journey, going outside of your bubble and now expanding your network. From our conversation before, you were telling me you're more involved in the genetics and experimenting too with other farmers, and then understanding how different climates in different areas and how that affects the growth as well. So let's get back on the farmers.
Switch my hat, my background. Yeah. So as I had mentioned, back in 2017, I was contacted by some friends who were moving some biomass, and it turns out that they were farming hemp. They were growing it at scale in Colorado, and they were actually breeding genetics. So providing different genetics hemp seeds, essentially feminized specifically to produce the flower or the bud, where these feminized plants in the flowers where you get your terpenes and your cannabinoids. So for a farmer to grow, to produce either a smokable hemp product or to be extracted for whether it's tinctures, edibles like gummies or capsules or topical products, being able to provide these genetics to farmers was an important part, especially in 2019. And unfortunately, too many farmers grew too much product, and there's been a glut ever since. No one really realized that you need to start with a buyer and work backwards. Identify whom you're going to be selling your product to, right, and figure out what the need is, at what scale, and grow for that off taker. That's being figured out now, certainly on the cannabinoid side of things. But as I had also mentioned earlier, cannabinoids are just one bucket. The other part of the plant, you can let it go to seed for your grain, for your protein. This is such a valuable protein rich, your omega-3 and 6, like having access to healthy food is something that the world certainly needs. And to be able to grow a plant that produces so much good, rich, nutrient food is an important piece. And in addition to that, there's the stalk. So when we talk about the plant and the stalk, the fiber, which is made up of the bast, the outer part of the plant, which can be for textiles or for non-woven coarse material, which can go into like automobile panels or insulation, as well as the hurd, which is that inner core, which can be produced for animal bedding or hempcrete. As well as it can be broken down into a micronized into powder to be used for inputs, for fillers, for like biocomposites. So there's so many applications. It's a pretty amazing thing, but it all starts with the genetics. So one thing that the International Hemp Exchange had been doing is identifying quality genetics for different applications, again, whether that be cannabinoids, grain, or fiber, or a combination. You can do dual cropping, or some people are doing tri-cropping, but it's been prohibited here in the US to grow for 80 years. So most of these genetics are being imported from different regions, whether it's Asia or Europe or Canada. And the plant produces, it's sensitive to the light cycle. So if you're growing, say a Canadian varietal for fiber, you want it to be tall, but it's typically used to being grown in northern latitudes. And if you try to grow it in, say, Texas, and it flowers when it's only a foot tall, you're not going to get a lot of fiber or hurd from that varietal. And you really don't want to make the mistake of purchasing a lot of seeds. It's not going to perform well for you based on that latitude. So, doing research is one thing that I'm involved with for this year, which is very exciting, working with the Global Hemp Association. They are currently raising some funds to do a research project, which is going to take 10 different varietals that are fairly common from different regions that are available to be grown, but they're going to do small plots. They're going to take those 10 varietals and grow them in six different regions of the US to be able to see how they perform. There's lots of research that academics are doing, which is wonderful. And there's so many things to look at, from pest pressure and disease and weed pressure, but from a farmer perspective, specifically growing for fiber, because if that's the market demand, that's the type of plant you want to focus in on. Let's see how it performs. And so it's a real necessary and important piece of the research. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of research that needs to be done, whether that's the off-taker, the buyer, figuring out how this material works in a product they're trying to produce, as well as how those genetics grow in a certain region for a processor. And that's a kind of the last piece that I'll touch on is with the International Hemp Exchange. We have some relationships with some really interesting technology that's on the processing, both a solventless extraction for cannabinoids, as well as a mill that uses natural sound resonance disintegration. It's a really cool technology using frequency and shearing forces. It
Wow.
breaks apart the plant. And again, it's been prohibited for 80 years.
Yeah.
So when you look at this crop, how to produce these different materials, these different products, it's going to require research on genetics and processing. And that's something I'm really excited to be involved in. And I could talk about it for days.
So where do you see yourself in the next, 3 to 5 years, and even where would you like to see not only just yourself, but the industry as a whole?
Well, literally, where do I see myself? Kind of back to where this all started, traveling around the country. That's what I started to do again, more so to see plants in field. So I've done some local R&D with the University for Cannabinoids. This past summer, I was in Indiana seeing some of these fiber varietals and how they perform. I was out in California where I saw some of the Guinness Book of World Records was submitted a 24-foot hemp stalk that was being grown out there. You got to see it, but traveling and going to conferences. So tomorrow I'm leaving to go to the World Ag Expo. I'll be down at the Oklahoma Hemp Summit a couple of weeks from then. And then I'm going to the Industrial Hemp Summit here in North Carolina, back out to Colorado for NOCO Hemp Expo. So it's all about relationships.
Yeah.
It's really important to have a relationship with this plant as well as with people who are involved in it, whether they're farmers, processors, or manufacturers, to really try to connect these dots and figure out this puzzle, and develop good relationships to try to help solve this really important puzzle that we're up against. With the cannabinoid piece of helping people locally, it's really important to me and I enjoy doing that. But when you look at the scale and the opportunity to affect, this planet is being challenged with a lot of carbon, too much in the atmosphere, and this plant can, draw down that carbon, get it into the soil, sequester it into these different products, whether it's a hempcrete, or there's so many different interesting projects that people are looking at. And, I want to be involved. So I'm just getting out there and showing up and meeting people and trying to figure out value, and help, roll up my sleeves, and we got to do this. I got kids. This is an important thing. It's not often in life that you really get a second chance. And having been in this industry 30, 25 years ago, to be back involved in it, now that it's legal, and seeing all these amazing things actually coming to fruition has been really special. And I'm really excited to continue to do it. I don't know what that's going to look like because this industry is ever changing and you kind of got to be on your toes and just go with it,
Yeah.
So that's what I'm
I appreciate really what you're doing to connect things, to connect the farmer. And I think it's very important in the industry right now that we all come together and share experiences so that we can all grow together, So thank you for the time that you're taking to do that,
Absolutely.
to help grow us all as a whole and fight bigger problems, right?
It's a global industry, and I really appreciate you reaching out to hear a little bit more about what I've been up to. And some point in the future, I'm happy to dive deeper into any one of these topics, but who knows what will be happening in a month or a year from now. It's amazing to be involved and be a part of it. And I really hope for the best, because the planet really needs this plant, and the people can really benefit from it.
So maybe we can end with a little bit of advice from your expertise as far as for the entrepreneur, for the CBD entrepreneur, or for the farmer, for a little advice for people in the industry right now to overcome, any of the current challenges and moving forward.
Okay.
That was kind of loaded, but
just give it.
Let me rephrase that. What would be your best advice for an entrepreneur in the hemp space?
Well, there's a lot to learn about the plant. It's highly complex. It helps serve and benefit us as humans, and we can help serve and benefit it as a species to continue to produce what it is that, or which of the things that it can produce, whether we're talking about terpenes, cannabinoids, the herd, the fiber, the plant needs to be grown, and you need to understand it from a feeding regimen as far as nutrients, again, what region it's being grown, the soil that it's being grown in, how you water it, how you harvest it, how you process it, how you turn it into input materials. So to get started, what I've been saying is to begin with the end in mind, in trying to understand that this is an industry. We are, making a market and identifying what that market is, because if you can't sell it, then it's not sustainable.
Right.
But you really need to focus on the farmer, because without the farmer, there is no hemp industry. I mean, this is a plant, this is a crop, and
Right.
starting small, I think, is important to, again, learn about the plant, how to grow it, and build relationships with processors, because they're the ones that are going to be turning the plant into the post-processed material that goes into different products. And each one of these touch points, find your passion. I mean, at the end of the day, there is so much opportunity, whether it's on the legal side with law, whether it's farming, whether it's with sales.
Right.
If you're mechanically minded, there's all sorts of figuring out different technologies to help process the plant. So start with, like, what's your passion? What gets you excited? And there's certainly something you can couple up to be involved with in this industry. Yeah. It's just, there's nothing to it but to do it. Just get started, get going. We have
we need more people to get involved too.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Grow this big together.
Yeah, but if you're entrepreneurial minded, I mean, what do you want to do? It's possible. You just got to really just get in there and do it. So find people that are doing what you're interested in doing, and volunteer, get involved. There's going to be field trials. Go see these plants perform in how they grow in the field. Go to a processor. This industry's really cool. There's a lot of really good people, and they want to help. They want to find other good people to work with. Yes. So it's just a matter, again, of building those relationships and taking the time and effort to learn, whether it's podcasts. All the miles that I've been traveling, I've been listening to a ton of podcasts, and there's a lot of information to glean and learn, and then just kind of explore and see where it takes you.
How can anyone contact you if they would like to?
Sure. So renewablelegistics.com, it's a company I started years ago, but it kind of is a landing page, essentially, that has access to moonscbd.com, and it has access to ihempx.com. So you could find me there, and then from there you can kind of explore some of the other things that I've been up to. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Drew, for your time. Really appreciate it. Appreciate the work that you're doing, and we hope the best for you, and hopefully maybe we'll have you back on the show again and dive a little bit deeper.
Sure, and any one of these things, happy to. And by the way, also with the connection piece, with the whole COVID thing, we've all been Zooming like we are now and doing podcasts, but LinkedIn is also a really good resource as far as socially to connect. So you could find me, Drew Kitt, on LinkedIn. The other social channels they don't like the plant so much. So it's really hard to speak to about it much, but yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. Send me a message.
And once we get this out, we'll link you out too.
Perfect.
So people can contact you as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks for letting me chat with you today.
Thank you, Drew.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to Hemp Foundation Talks. Hemp Foundation is a nonprofit social enterprise on a mission to provide solutions for our current ecological crisis. Hemp Foundation and their brand Uki has created a value chain from village farms to the marketplace, utilizing the many benefits of hemp to overcome deforestation, fight plastic pollution, and support regenerative practices to heal our earth. The foundation supports over 250 small village farmers in the Indian Himalayan region. In addition, they employ widows and women in the production of over 500 hemp products for the marketplace, from clothing to food to hemp bags, a large range of textiles, embroidered fabrics, home goods, and even hemp bioplastic. To learn more, visit hempfoundation.net.